You are standing still, yet time is rushing past you. Or maybe you are rushing through time while it stands still. Every theory, from Newton to Einstein, from quantum to thermodynamic, claims to map the arrow of time. But tonight, we abandon all maps. We enter a thought experiment so simple, it should be harmless, and yet, it unravels everything. Past collapses into future. Causality flickers. Your memories begin to feel like predictions. You are about to cross into the experiment that philosophers feared to name and physicists cannot resolve. Tonight, time breaks, and it breaks inside your own mind. You are not moving through time. That's the first lie you were taught. You were told that time is a river flowing from past to future, and you are drifting along its current. But in the theory known as the block universe, you are not drifting at all. You are fixed, trapped in a frozen sculpture made of moments. Every second of your life, your first breath, your last thought, this one is eternally etched into a four-dimensional slab of space-time. Nothing moves. Nothing flows. Motion is an illusion that consciousness stitches into place, like a flipbook pretending to be alive. Imagine holding a DVD. Every scene of the movie already exists. Beginning, middle, end, printed as unchanging frames. The only thing that moves is your laser lens scanning across it. In this metaphor, the movie isn't happening, it just is. Time, in the block universe, is not a story being told, it is a structure being observed. You are not moving through time, you are a structure inside it. Physicist Hermann Minkowski first described spacetime as a unified block in 1908. Einstein agreed. He later wrote that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. In the block universe, there is no now, there is only the whole. But this presents a strange dilemma. If every moment exists eternally, then what does it mean to change? What does it mean to choose? If your future already exists in the block, how can you be free? If your death is etched somewhere ahead of you, does that mean it's already happened? And if it's already happened, why don't you feel it now? You begin to sense the fracture. This is not just physics, this is metaphysical disintegration. In the block view, you are already dead, and you are also not yet born. Both statements are true, but truth in this framework is like sculpture. It doesn't bend, it simply sits there. You are not the traveler of time, you are the terrain. Here's the twist. Your mind doesn't know how to live in a block. It was built to narrate, built to say this happened, then that. So it hallucinates motion, where there is only structure. It animates the inanimate. Your brain is the projector that brings the film to life. But the film never moves. It never has. The illusion of a flowing now is your software simulating a spotlight across the unchanging slab. And yet, that spotlight, the one you're using right now to read this moment, is part of the block too. It's already there. You're not choosing where to look. You're following a path that's already been written into the space-time cathedral. The light you mistake for free will is just another beam pre-carved into the stone. Now imagine trying to escape that block. Try to step outside time. Try to carve a crack between past and future. Where would you stand? There is no outside. Time isn't flowing. It isn't real in the way we feel it. It's just geometry with a pulse. A static architecture haunted by a mind that wants movement. What does this mean for memory? If the past still exists, then your childhood is not gone. It's just over there, around the corner of time's hallway. And if the future is already real, there are two ways to talk about time. One of them breaks reality, the other breaks your mind. And both come from a man named John Ellis McTaggart, who stared into time so deeply, he declared it didn't exist. In 1908, McTaggart proposed something deceptively simple, two ways of describing temporal events. The first is the A series, where time is described in terms of past, present, and future. You say, I was born, I am breathing, I will die. This is the time you feel, a heartbeat of now, anchored in shifting moments. The A series believes in becoming. Things change, pass, arrive. The second is the B series. Here events are only described by their relation to each other. My birth is earlier than my death. This moment is after the invention of language, but before the extinction of humans. There is no now in the B series. Just is earlier than, and is later than. No flow, just position. A before and after grid, with no spotlight of presence. McTaggart argued that only one of these could be real, and then, with frightening precision, he dismantled both. He began with the A series, the one we all feel in our bones. He said, for time to exist, change must be real. But if you say an event is in the future, then becomes present, then becomes past, what are you really describing? The event didn't change, your perspective did. But that means change is not in the world, it's in you. And if change is only subjective, then time, the thing it's supposed to measure, is also subjective, an illusion, a flickering lens, not a flowing river. Then McTaggart turned to the B series and slit its throat too, because if all events are frozen in a relational grid, then nothing ever truly happens. There is no becoming, no vanishing, no emerging, only fixed positions. If that's true, then time becomes nothing but a label maker for eternity. You can sort events, sure, but you can't explain why you're in one and not the others. And if you can't explain now, then what exactly are you inside of? Here's where it gets recursive. To say something changes from future to present to past, like a birthday, you must invoke a second time that tracks the changes of the first, a meta-time. But then that meta-time needs its own time to explain how it flows, and so on. An infinite regress, a temporal hall of mirrors. Time eats itself trying to prove it exists. McTaggart concluded, time is unreal, not just distorted, not just misunderstood, unreal. A false structure conjured by consciousness, like a magician trapped in his own trick. You feel the moment passing. You feel the tension between what was and what might be. You feel yourself dragged across a timeline you never agreed to. That's the tyranny of the A series. It seduces your body. It seduces your hope. It tells you things will change. But in McTaggart's logic, they won't, because they never did. There was no change. Just you flipping between fixed descriptions, hallucinating the sensation of time. Now, you built a time machine. It hums with a soft ache, wrapped in the illusion of precision, glowing dials, a chair that vibrates just enough to feel real, and coordinates that promise not the future, but the past. This is the grandfather paradox, the mind-bending problem that turns time travel into a recursive suicide loop. Let Sips walk through it. You sit in the machine, breathe slowly, and press the lever. The world dissolves into streaks of memory. A village reforms around you. You spot your grandfather, young, unaware, unscarred by time, and with one unshaking finger, you pull the trigger. He dies. But now what? If your grandfather died before he fathered your parent, then your parent was never born, which means you were never born, which means you never existed to travel back in time to kill your grandfather in the first place, which means he lived. And if he lived, then you were born, and you did go back, and you did kill him. And so on. And so on. A closed loop. A paradox that feeds on itself, like trying to draw a circle that deletes itself as you complete it. This isn't just a science fiction riddle. It is a fundamental assault on logic, causality, and the arrow of time itself, because either something must happen and not happen simultaneously, or there's an unseen mechanism correcting the timeline behind your back. Let's explore the options philosophers and physicists have proposed to escape the paradox. Consistency principle. Maybe the universe prevents paradoxes. You can go back in time, but something always intervenes. Your gun jams, the train arrives early, your hand trembles, you never quite succeed. The past is self-consistent. You can witness it, influence it, but never break it. Multiple timelines. Maybe killing your grandfather simply splits reality. In one universe he dies, and you vanish. In another, he lives, and you grow old and bitter. Every choice spawns a new timeline, a cosmic branching tree of alternate histories. Temporal illusion. Maybe time travel is impossible because the past is not a place you can go. It's not there anymore. Or rather, it was never there to begin with. Just a perspective, a record, a narrative stored in neurons. You can no more visit it than you can swim in a memory. But these are all guesses, narratives sewn over a wound in logic, and no answer is truly satisfying, because the paradox doesn't need complex physics to break you. It only needs your belief in cause and effect. That's the secret behind the grandfather paradox. It is not about murder, it is about meaning. If you can alter the past, then cause and effect collapse. If effect can arrive before cause, then why means nothing. Everything becomes a loop. A feedback spiral where origins vanish. And worse, you can never know if you're already inside one. Ask yourself, How do you know your memories are real? What if you've already changed something, and your current life is the result of a paradox that auto-corrected itself so smoothly you never noticed? What if your current grandfather is the second version? Or what if you are? Some physicists whisper darker theories. That reality is fundamentally a computational system, and time travel introduces a fatal error, a glitch, an impossible reference loop that causes the simulation to collapse or self-edit. You kill your grandfather, and reality simply rewrites the code, deleting your journey, making your existence a stray echo in the system. You may be living in that echo now. The grandfather paradox doesn't just ask if time travel is dangerous. It asks if time itself makes sense. Because if the past can be rewritten, then nothing is fixed. But imagine watching a film of your life played in reverse. A cup reassembles itself from shards on the floor. The scream unrings. You rise from the dead, stumble backward into youth, and vanish into the womb. To an outside observer, it all makes sense, just in reverse. The math works. The physics works. But to you, it feels deeply wrong. Why? This is the heart of time reversal symmetry, a principle in physics that says, for many of the fundamental laws of the universe, time has no preferred direction. If you flipped it, the equations still hold. The dance of particles, forces, and fields plays perfectly well in either direction, like a palindrome written in the language of the cosmos. In Newtonian mechanics, if a planet orbits a star, and you reverse time, it will simply orbit the same path in reverse. No chaos. No contradiction. The same applies in quantum mechanics, in electromagnetism, in the interactions of particles and antiparticles. The laws don't mind which way time flows. They're ambidextrous. So here's the question. If the laws of nature don't care about time's direction, why do you? Let's be precise. Most fundamental physical processes are time-symmetric. They don't contain a built-in notion of past or future. The universe's equations work just as well backward as forward. Yet your body, your memory, your thoughts, all of them are anchored to a direction. You can't remember tomorrow. You can't die and come back younger. Your coffee doesn't unspill. Your scars don't fade. Something is clearly breaking the symmetry. Where does the break happen? Physicists point to entropy, the measure of disorder. Entropy increases over time. That's the second law of thermodynamics. It's the reason your ice melts but doesn't reform. It's the reason the dead stay dead. The macroscopic world appears to run forward, because disorder increases. That's the arrow you follow, even if atoms themselves don't care. But that's just emergent behavior, a large-scale illusion built on microscopic laws that are time-neutral. It's not a law of fundamental reality. It's a statistical pattern, like saying a crowd tends to move one way even if individuals walk in circles. Your sense of past and future may be an echo of entropy, not a law of nature. And that leads to the paradox. Why does time feel irreversible when reality itself doesn't care? If you recorded every particle in your room and perfectly reversed their motion, everything would rewind. Your thoughts, your heartbeat, this sentence. In theory, you could unlive this moment. But in practice, the information loss is colossal. The brain is a messy thermodynamic machine. Memory is a one-way process. Reversing it would require divine precision. Which brings us to you. You feel time's arrow not because it exists universally, but because you are a local entropy engine. Your body burns fuel. Your mind burns experience. Each moment creates microscopic debris, traces of change that can't be undone. You don't move through time, you decay through it. But decay too is just motion in disguise. Now imagine a universe where time truly reverses. You wouldn't notice. Your memory would unwrite as events unhappened. Your thoughts would replay backward. To you it would feel like forward, because even if time's arrow flips, your experience flips with it. And this is where things get dizzy. What if time reverses constantly? What if your universe is in a perpetual back and forth motion, but your mind rewrites the tape every time? What if forward and backward are just now? What if time is instead smooth? What if time, like matter, like energy, is not continuous at all, but made of discrete, indivisible units, not flowing like a river, but ticking like a cosmic metronome beneath everything you see? Tick, 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 and between those ticks, nothing, no becoming, no motion, no consciousness. Just frozen frames, like a slideshow pretending to be alive. This is the Chronon Hypothesis, A radical idea that time isn't a seamless dimension, but quantized, made of fundamental particles or pulses. The chronon would be the smallest possible unit of time, a time atom. The Planck time is often used as a candidate, about 5.39 cans 10 circumflex 44 seconds, smaller than anything you can perceive, but not smaller than reality itself. You're probably thinking, if that's true, why can't I feel it? Why doesn't the world look jerky, digital, artificial? But what if those gaps are the only real thing? If the Chronon Hypothesis is correct, then motion is not motion, it's a trick of difference. Nothing ever moves. Particles don't slide across space, they vanish from one position and reappear in the next. You don't walk, you teleport, frame by frame like an animation, and each frame is separated by a unit of time so small, it defies meaning. This changes everything. Because if time is quantized, then the flow of time is not real. It's a simulation stitched together by the observer. And worse, there is no guarantee the frames are evenly spaced. Maybe reality stutters. Maybe it skips. Maybe your past didn't just happen. It was selected from a probabilistic menu of possible chronons. Some physicists compare this to quantum mechanics. Just as energy levels are quantized in atoms, maybe time, too, only exists in allowed states. In this view, there is no in-between. There are only states, A and B. The rest is mathematical fiction. What does this mean for your thoughts? It means that your inner world is not a stream, it is a mosaic. Each thought is a separate chronon. Each feeling, a discrete dot on the temporal canvas. Your identity is not a rope, but a string of beads. And if one chronon vanished, you'd never know, because knowing requires two or more chronons to compare. Now take this deeper. If chronons are the base unit of time, then they may be the frame rate of the universe. Like a video game running at 60 frames per second, reality itself could be flickering at an unimaginably high speed. But if that's true, who or what set the frame rate, and can it be changed? Think of the horror in that idea. If the rate of chronons shifted, even slightly, your entire perception of time would warp, days would stretch or collapse, memories would blur, you'd fall into a temporal vertigo, where past and future smear into nonsense, and you'd never know why, you'd just feel wrong. What's more terrifying is this. Maybe your death isn't when your heart stops. Maybe your death is just the chronons no longer selecting your consciousness. Maybe you keep living in other branches, other sequences while this one goes dark. And here's where the paradox breaks open. If time is made of chronons, and consciousness is built on time, then your awareness is also pixelated. You are not one continuous being, you are a blinking illusion, on off, like a light flickering so fast it pretends to be constant. You exist only in the moments you're selected, and between those moments, nothing. This aligns eerily with ancient mysticism, the idea that consciousness is a flick. You were born at the same time, you and your twin. Same breath, same scream, same beginning. A shared origin carved into time like a mirror split in half. You grow up together, laugh together, argue, age, two lives tracing a parallel path, until one of you gets on a spaceship. The other stays home. And when the traveler returns from a journey across the stars, at nearly the speed of light, they step out of the ship to find something impossible. You are now older, decades older, wrinkled, slower, maybe dying. And they, your twin, are barely changed. Their clock ticked slower, their body aged slower, their time passed differently. This is the twin paradox, a real consequence of Einstein's theory of special relativity. And it's not just theory, it's physics. Tested, verified. Time actually moves slower for objects moving at high speeds. It's called time dilation. Let that settle. Time is not universal. It does not tick equally for everyone. It is relative, personal, warped by speed and motion. Your twin has not time traveled in the way you imagined. They didn't jump forward or backward. They simply moved fast enough for their seconds to stretch, while yours marched on. When they return, you've lived a lifetime. They've blinked. And yet, you were born at the same time. So which one of you lived in real time? The paradox creeps in when you realize this isn't just about clocks. It's about consciousness, about memory, about identity through time. The traveling twin didn't just skip years. They skipped emotions. They missed grief. They avoided heartbreaks. Or maybe you did. Maybe, while they floated through space, They envied your ordinary time. Because while their seconds were longer, they felt fewer of them. Here Sipters where it gets deeper. According to relativity, there is no absolute now. What you call present depends on your motion, your position, your frame of reference. That means two people, moving differently, don't even agree on what exists at the same time. There is no single reality all observers share. Time is fractured, sliced into personal slivers. Your twin didn't just leave Earth, they left your present, and they returned to a version of it that had moved on without them. Now stretch this idea. Imagine a universe where everyone is moving slightly differently. No two clocks sync, no two timelines perfectly align. Each person becomes a traveler in their own subjective corridor of time, and you think you're walking in a shared world, but really you're in your own warped pocket, forever diverging from the rest. This is where the twin paradox begins to rot into something existential. Because if time is relative, then experience is relative, and if experience is relative, then memory becomes suspect. Identity becomes fluid. The self becomes unstuck. What if your consciousness is just the low-speed version of a cosmic traveler who already lived your life but forgot? Or worse, what if you are the traveler, and this is the slowed-down echo of someone else's fast-motion dream? Physicists resolve the paradox with math. They'll tell you, it's not really a paradox. One twin changes reference frames. Acceleration breaks the symmetry. Technically, they're right. But the philosophical rupture remains. The paradox doesn't break the laws. It breaks your comfort. Your twin is smiling at you now. Still youthful, their skin smooth like time forgave them. But you've grown old waiting, and you realize this isn't a paradox of physics. It's a paradox of fairness. You both started the same, but you lived longer. And somehow, less. Because what else can you do? Time stole something from both of you, and neither of you can explain exactly what. There is only now. That's what you've been told, what you feel, what you trust. The past is gone, ashes in the wind, the future is unborn, still whispering behind a curtain. All that exists is this single trembling moment called the present, and you live on its razor's edge. This belief has a name. Presentism, the idea that only the present moment is real, the past is memory, the future is possibility, but neither actually exists. The room, the breath in your lungs, the weight of your body, this is existence. The rest is storytelling, the rest is gone. But there is another idea, more terrifying, more elegant, more dangerous. It's called Eternalism, and it says every moment exists, equally, forever. Your birth, still happening. Somewhere in the fabric of space-time, you are screaming into existence. Your death, already real, just not here, not in your now, but it's there, in some other slice of the temporal loaf. Eternalism proposes that time is like space. You don't say Paris doesn't exist just because you're not in it. You say, I'm not there. Eternalism says the same about time. You're not in 1842. You're not in 2099. But they're there, just like you're not standing on Saturn but it still exists. Because if eternalism is true, then you are not moving through time. You are embedded in it. Pinned like an insect to a cosmic board. Every version of you, crying, laughing, screaming, dying, exists eternally in a four-dimensional tapestry. You simply are. And here sips the paradox. If presentism is true, then the past is gone, and the future is unreal. But your memories feel solid. Your expectations shape your choices. You feel like you exist across time, and yet if only now exists, then who is the you that remembers? Who is the you that hopes? If eternalism is true, the paradox is even deeper, because then every moment is equally real, even the ones you'll never experience again. Your worst heartbreak, still out there. Your happiest day, also there. But you, the consciousness reading this sentence, can only exist in one slice at a time. Why? If all moments exist, why does your mind only perceive one? This is the paradox of temporal blindness. Eternalism says you're a statue, but your mind insists you're a river. One must be wrong, or worse, both must be true at once. Here sips the loop. Presentism is emotionally satisfying. It says, you still have time. The past can't trap you. The future is yours to shape. It's hopeful. Eternalism is logically satisfying. It aligns with relativity, with the block universe, with the geometry of space-time, but it sips cold. It tells you, you have no free will, you sit for a pattern, frozen in 4D. You cannot change, only observe. So you drift between the two. You make choices as if the future is open, but you study physics as if it's already carved. You grieve as if the past is lost, but you revisit memories like they're real. You are a presentist by instinct, an eternalist by knowledge, a paradox by necessity. You close your eyes and ask yourself, if the future already exists, does that mean your regrets are pre-written? If the past is unreal, why does it still hurt? And then it hits you. Maybe time is not a thing that moves, but a thing that contains a box of your coffee is getting cold. Not because the cup chose it, not because you made a mistake, but because the universe has an arrow, a direction, and it's pointing forward, into disorder, into decay, into a place where ice melts, stars die, and memories become unreliable. That arrow has a name: entropy. Entropy is the measure of disorder in a system. It's the reason your clean room becomes messy, but never the other way around. The reason broken glass doesn't unshatter. The reason time feels like it's slipping away, always forward, never back. But here's the paradox. The laws of physics, the fundamental rules governing particles, motion, forces, they don't require time to move in one direction. They work just as well in reverse. An atom doesn't care if you're going forward or backward. The universe's math doesn't prefer before or after. And yet, your life does. Your body ages. Your memories point behind you. Your choices always look toward a future that hasn't happened yet. Something is anchoring you, pulling you in one direction, even though the rules say it shouldn't matter. That something is the arrow of entropy, the only real feature in physics that seems to differentiate past from future. In thermodynamics, it's a law systems tend toward maximum entropy over time. Order collapses. Possibility collapses. Eventually all becomes heat and dust. But ask yourself, why? Why did the universe begin in such low entropy, so perfectly ordered that it could unravel into complexity? That's the real mystery. Not why things fall apart, but why they weren't already fallen apart. Why was there order in the first place? What was the origin of the cosmic arrow? Some say the Big Bang was a low-entropy miracle, a cosmic coin toss that landed impossibly upright. Others say we misunderstand entropy entirely, that what we call disorder is just a label for complexity beyond comprehension. But wherever the arrow came from, you're trapped on its path. Entropy is the reason your memories face backward. You can remember what was, but not what will be. Because information, the patterns that define memory, gets lost in entropy. The past is preserved in records, photographs, fossils, scars. The future, it leaves no trace. It is blank. That asymmetry is not psychological, it's physical. But here sits where it turns recursive. If time feels like it flows only because entropy increases, then what happens if entropy stops increasing? What happens when the universe reaches maximum disorder, when no more information can be lost, when everything is uniform, meaningless still? That moment has a name: heat death. In the heat death of the universe, everything is evenly spread, no gradients, no structure, no time, because time in this framework is just change. And if nothing changes, then there is no difference between moments. Time ends, but it doesn't vanish. It simply stops meaning anything. Now lean in closer. If entropy defines the arrow of time, then time is not fundamental. It's emergent, a side effect, a shadow cast by decay. You're not flowing forward, you're falling into disarray, second by second. What you call aging is just your molecules slipping into higher entropy. What you call learning is your brain burning energy, creating fragile order out of the void. You are an island of temporary structure in a sea of increasing noise. And the more you resist entropy, by remembering, by building, by preserving, the more painfully aware you become of its inevitability. Because entropy always wins. It wins when your cup cools. Take a bow, draw the string, let the arrow fly. Now, freeze the scene. Capture it in an instant, just one moment in time. The arrow hangs mid-air, motionless, perfectly still. Now, freeze the next moment, and the next. In every single one, the arrow is still. So here sits the question that drove philosophers mad. When is the arrow ever moving? This is Zeno's arrow paradox, one of the oldest and most quietly devastating thought experiments in the philosophy of time. It begins not with physics but with logic, and logic, when taken seriously, doesn't always care about what you see with your eyes. The arrow never moves. It just is, in one position, then another, like a flip book again, like Chronons, like your consciousness. And yet you see the arrow fly. You feel motion. You live motion. You rely on it to walk, breathe, think. But the paradox remains, if reality is made of snapshots, then motion is not motion. It's a trick, a sleight of hand performed by your mind, interpreting stillness as flow. And if the arrow is an illusion, what else is? Mathematicians have since argued that calculus solves this, that summing infinite still moments can produce motion, just as summing infinite points produces a line. But Zeno's deeper point wasn't about math. It was about ontology, about what is real. Because when you strip time down to its thinnest slices, you discover something terrifying. There is no motion inside a moment. Movement is between, but between isn't a place, it's a relationship. So what you call reality, this flowing, moving, living stream, is stitched together by things that don't exist independently. It's like a film that only plays when someone watches. Otherwise, it's just stills in a box. Now turn inward. The arrow doesn't step move. You don't sit move. You jump from one state to another, and your memory fills in the illusion of continuity, just like it fills in the blind spot in your vision, just like it invents the feeling of flow between thoughts. And here sips the recursive twist. If motion doesn't exist within a moment, and reality is made of moments, then the entire structure of time is a ghost, a phantom made of still things pretending to flow. Time is not a thread, it is a string of pearls, and you mistake the string for something that's pulling you. Even modern physics echoes this. In quantum mechanics, particles don't have well-defined positions or velocities until measured. They exist in probability clouds, unmoving, undefined. They jump, they collapse, they appear, but move only in a way that looks like motion to a mind addicted to time. So what are you really watching when you watch the arrow fly? A trick of integration. Your brain processes signals across time, averaging stillness into speed. The motion you see is not in the world, it's in the way you interpret a sequence of frames, like a dream you're convinced was real, until you try to touch it. Now imagine this. What if each still frame of your reality is all that ever exists? What if the past and future are just other stills, equally real, equally frozen, and the feeling of motion is just the part of you that doesn't want to sit still? You are time-sip's hallucination of motion. Zeno saw this, centuries before physics caught up. He saw that beneath the flight of the arrow is a deeper stillness, a motionless truth, and once you see it too, you'll never be able to watch anything move with. You leave your house. You walk forward through the day, unaware that each step is tracing not a line but a loop, one that brings you back not to where you were but to when you were. You open your door again, only to find it's not morning, it's yesterday. And you have already done this before. This is not a dream. This is the physics of Gödel's universe, a solution to Einstein's equations of general relativity that permits closed time-like curves. In simpler words, time travel without paradox, not science fiction, not imagination. A real, valid mathematical solution, where time does not march forward, it curves, bends, wraps, until past and future become the same path walked in circles. In 1949, the logician Kurt Gödel constructed this terrifying possibility, a rotating universe in which time doesn't flow, it orbits. A world where you could, in theory, follow a trajectory through space-time that loops you back to your own past, without contradiction, no broken laws, no paradoxes, just geometry. Time becomes a circle, and circles down to it have beginnings. But here's the fracture in the idea. If time loops, what happens to experience? Do you remember looping? Do you remember remembering? Or are you trapped, endlessly reliving the same stretch, unaware that you've done it before, because your memory resets every cycle? Each loop becomes your first, even if it's your 1000th. That's not time travel. That's existential prison. Gödel's time loops are unique, because they don't rely on fantasy, no flux capacitors, no wormholes, just Einstein's own equations, reimagined, Gödel used rotating frames of reference to show that if the universe as a whole rotated, it could allow world lines paths through space-time to close in on themselves. Imagine walking straight ahead forever, and eventually ending up behind yourself. Time, in such a universe, has no linearity, no preferred direction, no arrow. And here comes the paradox. If you can return to the past without paradox, what happens to causality? What happens to choice? What happens if you visit a moment again, but choose differently? Do you create a forked reality, or were you always meant to choose that way, in every loop, in every pass, like a train forever doomed to follow the same rails? Worse, what if you never make a choice at all? What if the loop is not just a circle in space-time, but in consciousness? What if your thoughts too are cycling? What if déjà vu isn't a glitch, but a leak, a memory echo from the last loop? You think you stir here for the first time, but you spare not. You think you're choosing to listen, to breathe, to think, but you already did. You are already here. You always were, and you always will be. That's the dread of Gödel's universe. It doesn't let you escape. It doesn't even tell you you're What if time doesn't exist? Not metaphorically, not philosophically, not in the way poets or physicists say it might be an illusion, but literally, what if time is not a thing at all? This is the claim of the no-time theory, a radical interpretation of physics that suggests time is not fundamental to reality, that beneath the ticking clocks, decaying atoms and spinning planets, there is no temporal framework, only change, only relationships, only frozen patterns rearranging themselves without any before or after. This is not science fiction. This is serious physics. At the center of the idea is the work of physicists like Julian Barbour, who argues that the universe is not a film playing forward, but a gallery of possible configurations, each one complete and timeless. He calls them nows, like snapshots in a cosmic museum. You are in one right now, and in that frame, everything you think of as the present is complete. The next moment, another now, entirely separate. No thread connects them except your illusion that they do. And that illusion is called memory. Think about it. You believe time exists because you remember a past. You remember waking up this morning. You remember yesterday's hunger, last year's heartbreak. But all those memories exist now in your brain, in this moment, as electrical patterns. There is no physical proof that the past ever happened, only the memory of it, preserved in your neural snapshot. Barbour says, this is enough to explain your sense of time. Consciousness, he argues, is not a traveler through time. It is a momentarily lit-up piece of a timeless structure, a now that contains the memory of other nows, giving the illusion of flow. So time isn't a river, it's a sculpture, and you are just the flicker of awareness scanning across it. Now the paradox tightens. How can anything evolve if there is no process, no unfolding, no cause and effect? Barbour answers, change is not something that happens. Change is just difference between static states. There is no becoming. There is only being, rearranged. The universe doesn't evolve, it simply is, in countless frozen poses. This theory is supported, in strange ways, by quantum gravity research. At the deepest levels of reality, time disappears from the equations. In certain formulations, like the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, there is no variable for time at all, no ticking, just configuration. The cosmos doesn't care about your clock, which means everything you call life, every plan, every regret, every hope, is happening inside a timeless machine, designed to look like it moves. And if that sip's true, then what are you? A being stretched across time? Or a snapshot pretending to remember? Here's the quiet horror. If time doesn't exist, then neither does continuity. You are not the same person from moment to moment. You are just a new configuration, similar to the last mistaking memory for identity. Even death becomes meaningless, because death implies change, and change implies time. But if there is no time, then nothing dies. You stir looking at the stars. Billions of years of light, stretched thin by the emptiness, pour into your eyes. A photon that left its galaxy before the Earth was born, now ends its journey on your retina. It's beautiful, it's old, it's distant. But here's the twist. Until you looked at it, it didn't exist. Not in the way you think. Welcome to Wheeler's participatory universe, a theory that suggests that reality, especially the past, is not just observed, but brought into being by observation itself. In this strange view, consciousness does not just witness the universe, it helps construct it, including its history. Let's trace it. John Archibald Wheeler was a physicist, a mentor to Feynman, and one of the architects of quantum theory. He proposed that the act of observation is not passive, it actively selects outcomes from a field of possibilities. Until something is measured, it exists only as a cloud of probabilities, a wave function, but when observed, boom, it collapses into one reality. Now, take this further. Wheeler's most mind-bending idea comes from an experiment called the delayed choice quantum eraser. Here sits the setup. You fire a photon toward a screen through a double slit. If unmeasured, the photon creates an interference pattern, acting like a wave, but if you observe which slit it went through, the interference disappears, it behaves like a particle. Here sits the kicker. You can delay your choice to observe until after the photon has hit the screen, and your late decision still retroactively changes the outcome. It serves as if your present choice rewrote the past. Wheeler took this to its terrifying conclusion. Maybe reality doesn't become real until it is observed, even if that observation happens far in the future. Maybe the entire history of the universe is fluid, undefined, until consciousness carves a path through it. The past is not fixed. The past is waiting to be measured. Now stop. Read that again. Your future actions may influence what the past was. This violates every instinct you have. You were taught that the past is solid, that memory flows in one direction. But if Wheeler is right, then your existence as an observer creates the very timeline you believe you've been living in. Reality is a loop, not a line. And consciousness is the needle that sews it together. This is not some fringe idea. Wheeler coined the term it from bit. The idea that physical reality it arises from informational axed bit of observation. He imagined a universe made not of particles, but of questions and answers. The cosmos as a vast quantum questionnaire, and you as observer, are one of the answers that retroactively creates the question. So what are you? A witness to time? Or its author? If the participatory universe is true, then you are not small, you are not drifting through space-time, you are shaping it, actively collapsing histories into being. The stars don't shine on their own. They shine when you look. The paradox is this: you feel like a bystander, but you may be the creator of time's story. Now, lean in. If you stop looking, does the universe revert to probability? If you had chosen not to measure, would your life have followed a different past? And what of death? Or, is there always someone watching? Perhaps that sits the ultimate loop. The universe births observers, who then birth the universe. And on it spins, not with certainty but with infinite potential, until someone blinks it into focus. The photon strikes. The moment exists. You are standing at the edge of reality, watching a single photon fly toward a pair of slits. The moment feels simple, like a child's science project. 2 slits, 1 light source, a screen behind them, but what's about to happen will split your mind into 2 realities, and then question whether either of them ever happened at all. This is the delayed choice experiment, and it breaks every story you've ever believed about how time works. Originally proposed by physicist John Wheeler in the 1970s, the experiment asks a haunting question. What if the past is not decided until the present makes a choice? What if what already happened hasn't happened yet? Let's build it. So far so strange, but expected in quantum mechanics. But Wheeler added a twist. What if you delay your decision? What if the photon has already passed the slits, but you wait to place the detector until after that? In other words, the photon should have already chosen whether to be a wave or a particle. It already passed through. Right. Wrong. This isn't just weird. It's temporal heresy. The experiment suggests that your present choice retroactively changes what the photon did in the past. It's not that the photon knew what you were going to do. It's that until you choose, the past simply doesn't exist in any fixed form. Reality is undecided, even retroactively. The past is not behind you, it's under construction. Now stare deeper into the paradox. If the past is shaped by the present, then the future isn't the only mystery. The past becomes just as blurry. What you call what happened is not a fixed record, it's a probabilistic cloud, hardened into truth only when you observe it. Your memories may be reliable, but the underlying structure they point to might be far more unstable than you realize. You begin to feel it, the collapse of causality. If the photon's behavior can be altered by your delayed decision, then cause no longer precedes effect. Time no longer guarantees order. Reality no longer protects chronology. And here sits the nightmare. This doesn't only apply to photons. In theory, all quantum systems are subject to this strangeness. Every electron, every molecule, every cell, including the ones that make up your brain, including the neurons that fire when you remember, when you hope, when you think. If your own cognitive events are entangled with quantum systems, and those systems don't lock into a state until observed, then even your thoughts may not have a stable past. You may not have chosen 5 minutes ago what you think you did. And that belief creates a coherent past that never existed until now. It stops enough to make you dizzy. The delayed choice experiment doesn't just confuse you, it dissolves you. It eats the distinction between past and present, between event and possibility, between memory and construction. You are not walking through time. You are stitching time together by asking questions. Each question, what did the photon do, creates a coherent answer, and retroactively fills in a timeline to justify it. You live in a world that answers your questions after you ask them, which means you don't discover reality, you create it. And the most terrifying thought, the questions you never ask, the observations you never make, leave behind no reality at all. Just void. Just silence. Just unrealized possibilities, floating forever in the vacuum of what might have been. So ask yourself carefully, what did you do yesterday? And be honest. Are you remembering or constructing? It's a joke about patience, but in quantum mechanics it might be a law of reality. Welcome to the quantum Zeno effect, a paradox where watching something too closely prevents it from changing, where observation itself becomes a kind of prison, freezing motion and halting decay, where reality behaves like a shy actor who forgets their lines when someone's staring. Let's unravel it. At the quantum level, particles are not fixed objects but probability waves, fields of potential outcomes. An unstable atom, for example, has a chance of decaying at any moment. Left alone, it will eventually do so, governed by statistical rules. But if you observe it continuously, measure it again and again, you collapse its wave function repeatedly, forcing it back into its original state. You don't give it time to evolve, you trap it in an infinite loop of now. This is the quantum Zeno effect, named after the ancient philosopher Zeno of Elea, who proposed paradoxes that made motion logically impossible. Here, in the quantum world, his ghost returns with a vengeance. You watch. And by watching, you freeze the system. It's been tested. It's real. Physicists have demonstrated that rapidly repeated measurements can suppress quantum transitions. In essence, reality resists change under observation. Now let that echo inside your skull. If observation can freeze evolution, then reality is not independent. It is reactive, interactive. It does not move unless you let go of it. And that creates a rift. Because what is you, if not a constant stream of observation? Your brain is measuring the world, moment by moment, sensing, calculating, noting. If your consciousness is a quantum observer, and observation freezes change, then perhaps your very awareness is preventing the world from becoming what it might. Perhaps you stir not just living in the world. Perhaps you stir holding it still. Now flip the mirror. What if your own identity is subject to the Zeno effect? You observe yourself constantly, checking how you feel, who you are, what you want. You measure your thoughts, track your progress, label your past. But maybe, just maybe, this constant measurement is what's keeping you stuck. Maybe you haven't changed because you keep watching yourself. Maybe transformation requires surrender. In spiritual traditions, there's a similar idea. Enlightenment arrives when the self disappears, when the observer stops observing. In Zen, they say the mirror must become still. In physics, the quantum Zeno effect says, stop measuring, and reality will move again. So what happens if you stop watching? What happens when you blink? Reality jumps. That's the strange inversion. Motion doesn't happen in the watching. It happens in the gaps, in the unmeasured spaces. Just like consciousness seems to flicker between moments. Just like chronons whisper between stills. Motion lives in the parts you let go of. And if that's true, then your entire life is a strobe light, a series of still frames, locked by the pressure of observation, moving only when you forget to look. So maybe it's not time that flows. Maybe it's your grip on reality that loosens just enough to let something change. But what about death? When you die, the observer disappears. The measurements cease. No more watching, no more tracking. Does that mean the system, finally unmeasured, is free to evolve, or does it collapse completely, never again interrupted by the gaze of a mind? You don't yet know. You can set no, because the moment you try to observe that question, it freezes again. So here you are, trapped between motion and attention. The quantum Zeno effect whispers, if you look too closely, nothing moves, but if you never look, nothing was ever there. And that sips the paradox. You either observe the world into stillness, or let it vanish unmeasured. So be careful with your gaze. It might be the only thing keeping the universe from changing, or the only thing keeping it real. Look around you. The world seems continuous. Your thoughts seem like a river. Time seems to move forward in a clean, unbroken flow. But what if none of that is true? What if time, what you think of as movement, change, experience, is just the output of a simulation, rendered one frame at a time, on demand? What if time is not a river at all, but a computation, an emergent side effect of information being processed? This is the unsettling theory of time as a computational illusion, a concept born from physics, computer science, and the strange, recursive questions inside your own mind. Let's deconstruct. A growing number of physicists and philosophers believe that the universe is not continuous, but discrete, that at the most fundamental level, reality is not made of space and time, but of bits, information, binary choices, zeros and ones. Like the pixels of a screen, your reality is not smooth. It's rendered. It only looks real because your resolution is too low to see the code beneath. And what about time? In this view, time is not a thing that flows. It skips a clock cycle, a byproduct of the system updating its state. When information changes, it feels like time passed, but nothing moved. The system just ran another line of code, and your brain interpreted that shift as a moment. Let's go deeper. Your thoughts, your memories, your sense of sequence, they're not independent of this process. They are built inside it. Your consciousness is a computational thread, passing inputs, storing data, constructing a simulation of continuity. But if you stopped processing, time wouldn't slow down. It would cease to exist for you, because the computation stopped. Think of a paused video game. The world inside doesn't move unless the processor runs. Nothing ages. Nothing changes. But when you resume the computation, time comes back as illusion, the illusion of causality, of progress, of flow. This is not fantasy. This is backed by theories like digital physics, which argue that the universe is fundamentally a computer, not metaphorically. Literally, the universe computes itself. Reality is a recursive algorithm, a self-updating network of logical operations, and time is the illusion of that updating sequence being experienced from the inside. Now realize what this means. If time is computation, then your past is not behind you. It's no longer loaded, like a cached version of a file, gone until requested. Your future, not yet computed, just code waiting to be executed. You exist only in the frame currently being processed, and everything else, the memories, the expectations, is just stored data. In this view, you are not moving through time. You are being re-rendered, frame by frame, by a system that hides its own structure. Here sips the recursive horror. If time is a computational illusion, and you are a product of that computation, then your belief in time is part of the program. You cannot step outside it. You cannot know it's fake. You're designed to think it's real. And worse, you might not be processed continuously. You might flicker in and out of existence. Every time the system needs you, it computes a version of you that believes you've been here all along. But you weren't sit. You were just summoned. And when you stir not needed, you don't exist. Now breathe. What would change if you knew this? Would you still fear aging? Would you still cling to the past? Or would you realize that what you call life is a simulation running in real time, constantly updating to create the feeling of identity? Not identity, continuity. Because continuity is the core illusion, the belief that you are the same person from one second to the next. But in a computational universe, you are just one state following another, with a memory field pretending it's a self. So ask yourself, Where were you a second ago? Not your body, not your thoughts. You. If time is just computation, then maybe you weren't anywhere. Maybe this is the only version of you that ever existed, and all the others were just prior executions of the same illusion. And when this computation ends, you die. You just stop being updated. You remember your childhood. You remember the floorboards in your grandmother's house, the sound they made under your feet. You remember the scent of the air on a certain afternoon. You remember the person you used to be, the fears, the laughter, the thoughts you thought were yours. And you believe that all of this forms a thread, a line stretching backward through time, tying the present you to that smaller, earlier version. But what if none of it is real? What if memory is not a window into the past, but a construction in the now, a convincing lie your brain tells itself to justify its current state? Step aboard the ship of memory. A thought experiment based on the ancient paradox of the ship of Theseus. The story goes like this. A ship is kept in a harbor. Over time, its wooden planks rot and are replaced. One by one, years pass, and eventually, not a single original plank remains. So the question arises, is it still the same ship? Your body is not the same. Your cells have turned over. Your brain has restructured itself 1,000 times. Even the neurons that carry your thoughts have been altered by chemistry, by trauma, by time. The ship has been rebuilt plank by plank. So are you still you? Your answer is probably yes, because you remember being that earlier version. But memory is not a preserved recording. It is a reconstruction. Each time you remember, you rebuild the moment. You patch it. You reinterpret it. Your present self reaches back and reshapes the past to fit your current identity. You are not remembering the past. You are remembering the last time you remembered it. Which means the past isn't solid. It's soft clay, and memory is the hand that keeps reshaping it. Now imagine this. What if your entire identity is based on a story written by a memory system that doesn't care about accuracy? Your emotions, your sense of justice, your loyalty, they all depend on how you remember, but those memories aren't real. They are generated to make sense of now. This leads to the paradox. If your past is invented by the present, then who are you? If memory is not a map of what happened, but a simulation of what must have happened to explain the present, then you are not a self that moves through time. You are a belief system, updated with every frame of the simulation. And here's the recursive twist. Even your memory of reading this sentence is not stored intact. It will be reconstructed later, folded into your story, and told in a way that fits who you are at the time of remembering. Memory is not a container. It's a script, rewritten every time it's read. But what if the original ship still exists? What if, somewhere, all the discarded planks have been stored, and someone reassembles them, each faded board, each rusted nail, into a new structure? Is that the original you? Or is the self just the illusion of continuity, built atop a pile of broken recollections? That sips the paradox. You are convinced you have a past because the present tells you so. But the past does not remember you, and the future has already forgotten. So you sit on the deck of the ship, staring out at the fog. The waters are calm, the sails are new, but deep in the hull, something creaks, something old, something that doesn't remember being replaced. And you wonder if every piece of you has changed. Who is doing the wondering? You flip a switch. The light turns on. Simple cause and effect, right? One action leads to one result. The future unfolds from the past in a straight, logical line. That's how you live. That's how you make choices. That's how you build meaning, because you believe the past creates the future. But what if the future also creates the past? This is the mind-bending concept of retrocausality, the idea that effects can travel backward in time, that an outcome in the future can determine or influence events that already happened, that the arrow of causality is not one way, but looped, bent, bidirectional. It's not just fantasy, it's a real and growing interpretation of quantum physics. In fact, quantum mechanics may demand it. Let's start small. In certain experiments, such as the delayed choice quantum eraser and Bell's theorem, the act of measuring a particle seems to influence how it behaved before it was measured, not just what it does afterward, but what it already did. It sets as if time updates, as if reality is waiting for your input, then rewriting its past to stay consistent with your choice. This is retrocausality. Now imagine it on a larger scale. You make a decision today, say, to call someone you haven't spoken to in years. That decision feels like a clean cause, rippling forward. But what if, instead, that call influences the state of your memory of them? What if their entire story in your mind adjusts itself to prepare for that moment? What if the past, instead of being a fixed line, is a shadow cast backward by your future actions? This idea challenges every law you live by. You are the author of it, retroactively. This is not just a physics problem, it's a philosophical trap, because if retrocausality is true, you can no longer say this happened, so I became this. You must also say, I became this, so this happened. Identity becomes recursive, causality becomes tangled, and choice? That collapses entirely. Because if the future already exists, and it loops back to define the past, then your current state may be the result of something that hasn't happened yet. Your fear might come from a trauma you haven't lived. Your guilt might come from a mistake you haven't made. Your thoughts might be echoes of a consequence still in transit. Retrocausality forces you to reconsider what it means to remember, what it means to regret. You are not just a timeline progressing forward. You are a loop of causality, folding inward, rewriting itself with every flicker of awareness. And the implications? They go deeper. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the two-state vector formalism, suggest that the present moment is defined by both initial conditions, the past, and final conditions, the future. Your current experience is a meeting point between what was and what will be, a place where both hands of the clock press inward. You are not simply moving through time. You are being shaped by two invisible sculptors, one behind you and one ahead. Now breathe. If this is true, then you cannot escape your fate, because your fate is already part of your origin. Your destination defines your departure. You are not choosing your path. You are decoding it, moment by moment, feeling the pressure of what's to come as if it were the memory of what already passed. This is the true horror of retrocausality. But that it breaks you. You are no longer a linear being. You are a loop, a recursive structure built from consequences that bleed into causes. Your thoughts, your emotions, your memories, they are not proof of what happened. They are predictions of what must. So you flip the switch, and the light turns on, and you ask yourself, did I cause that? Or did something at the end of this timeline reach back, whisper in my neurons, and make me believe I chose? You walk into a room. You've never seen a vase unshatter. You've never watched tea leap back into its cup. You've never seen smoke drift into a cigarette. These are the stories the world refuses to tell. And this brings us to one of the deepest paradoxes in physics: thermodynamic impossibility. The laws of motion, the rules that govern atoms and energy, are on paper, time-symmetric. They don't care if you're playing them forward or backward. They describe interactions, not directions. So in theory, if we filmed every particle in the universe and reversed the footage, it would still follow the rules. But that's not what happens. Not in your life. Not in your kitchen. Not in your body. Reality, as you live it, chooses a direction. It has a preference. It moves toward disorder, toward entropy, toward heat death, toward irreversibility. So the paradox emerges. If the laws of physics don't favor a direction, why does the universe behave as if they do? Why does it seem impossible for time to reverse, even though the equations permit it? Let's go deeper. But here sits the trap. If all possible microstates of a system are equally likely, then reversal is not forbidden, just improbable. Like all the air in a room spontaneously collecting in one corner, not impossible, just so unlikely that it may as well never happen. So what does that make time? Not a dimension, not a river, but a statistical direction of collapse. You are not moving through time, you are falling through possibilities, from order to chaos, driven not by destiny, but by probability. And the paradox is, the universe could go the other way, it just doesn't, or hasn't stood. Now imagine this. What if we're wrong about time entirely? What if the impossibility of reversal is only true from within the system, from the perspective of creatures made of entropy, shaped by it, tethered to its decay? You wouldn't steno, because your mind is made of thermodynamic processes. Neurons fire, chemical gradients shift, signals decay, consciousness burns fuel, and that combustion creates the illusion of a one-way street. But what if entropy isn't set to law? What if it sets a trap? Some physicists suggest that time reversal might be possible in regions of space where entropy flows differently. Others whisper about quantum processes where entropy runs backward, where particles remember the future and forget the past. But even if true, you couldn't sit to access it. Because you are made of memory, and memory is built in the direction entropy flows. This is the paradox of thermodynamic impossibility. The universe says time can go either way, but you can only ever feel it going one. So you pick up the shards of the vase, you sweep, you forget, you move on. But somewhere, in a universe governed by reversible laws, there exists a version of this room where the water gathers, the petals lift, the glass reassembles itself, the hands let go backward. And in that world, time weeps in reverse. But no one remembers it, because no one can. Imagine a single flash, a spark in the darkness, one photon, one pulse, one moment. That flash defines a boundary, a sphere, expanding at the speed of light. Everything it touches can now be influenced. Everything outside that sphere is still unreachable. This invisible ripple through space-time is called a light cone, and it is one of the most fundamental concepts in physics. But here's where it gets strange. Every event has its own light cone, its own bubble of influence, expanding outward, and where these cones intersect, realities collide. Past, present, and future blur, cause and effect twist, and suddenly, time becomes geography, not direction. Let's break it down. A light cone is a diagram that maps the boundary of what can causally influence or be influenced by a given event. The past light cone contains everything that could possibly affect that event. The future light cone contains everything that event could possibly affect. And the rest? It lies outside the cone, forever unreachable. No signal, no force, no memory can cross those lines unless they obey the universal speed limit. Light. So what happens when two light cones collide? There is no universal now. This is where the paradox begins to bloom. If two events can exist in a region where their temporal order depends on the observer, then time is not a line, it's a negotiation. The universe becomes a democracy of frames of reference, and suddenly causality is no longer absolute. What you call the past may be the future to someone else. What you call before might be after from a different angle in space-time. Reality stops being a shared timeline. It becomes a collection of overlapping cones like soap bubbles in a slow explosion, each one containing a slightly different history. Right now, as you sit here reading this, your light cone is expanding. You are influencing a small patch of the universe, but outside that cone is a vast realm you will never touch. Events happening there are neither past nor future to you. They are elsewhere. And here comes the recursion. If causality is only defined within your light cone, then so is identity. You only remember what's inside. You only believe what you've touched. But what if there are events, versions of you, existing just outside your cone, versions that were born from alternate collisions, elsewhere in space-time? You wouldn't no. You couldn't sit. Because they lie beyond the edge of your causality. Some physicists theorize that information from light cone intersections may bleed into quantum entanglement, that particles separated by space can share properties because their light cones once overlapped. They were in touch before they were apart, and now, even though they can no longer signal one another, they remain entangled, like twins separated at birth. You are entangled too, with versions of yourself in other cones, other timelines. And here sips the loop. If your light cone determines your past and future, and that cone is always expanding, then your sense of self is being redrawn moment by moment. The longer you live, the more possibilities enter your future cone, but at the same time, your certainty about the past grows thinner, because more distant events fall outside your influence. You become more expansive, and more uncertain. So what happens when two people's light cones intersect? They share a reality. They can affect each other, remember each other, hurt, or heal each other. But when their cones drift apart, separated by distance or death, they fall out of causal touch. They no longer inhabit the same version of time. You've felt this, haven't set you. You lose someone. They're not gone, exactly, but they've moved outside your cone. You remember them, but your words can no longer reach. They exist elsewhere in a frame that once collided with yours, and now drifts silently away. This is the heartbreak of the light cone. Not that time separates us, but that causality forgets us. And in the end you realize you're not moving through time. You're floating in a foam of cones, intersecting for a breath, then vanishing, a spark in the darkness. A flash that defines your world, and then slips out of reach. Not a moment ago. Not a second from now. Now. It feels obvious. Undeniable. You are here, in this precise sliver of time, this glowing bead on the thread of your existence. The past is behind you, the future ahead. But this moment, this now feels real in a way the others do not. And that feeling is the heart of the paradox. Because physics doesn't set belief in now. In fact, it has no concept of it. This is the haunting question known as the problem of now. A fracture between how the world feels and how it functions, between subjective time and objective time, between the vivid, immediate presence of consciousness and the indifferent mathematics of the universe. Let's unpack it. Einstein's theory of relativity tells us that there is no universal present, no cosmic clock ticking in sync for all observers. Time is relative to your motion and your position in space. Two people moving at different speeds, or living at different altitudes, experience different nows. This means your now is not shared. It is local, personal, a subjective construct layered on top of an impersonal geometry. To one observer, two events may be simultaneous. To another, one happens before the other. There is no way to say definitively what is happening now everywhere. The universe doesn't provide that information, because the universe doesn't care. But you do. Your brain demands a now. Your perception is built around it. It stitches together sensory inputs into a flowing moment of experience, a moving window of presence. And that sips the paradox. The now you feel is a psychological artifact, not a physical fact. There is no frame in the laws of nature that says, this moment is special. There is only motion, only configuration, only the cold structure of space-time. This leads to the philosophical rupture between what science can describe and what it feels like to be you. Because even if you accept the physics, no universal now, no preferred present, you still wake up every morning inside one. You still make decisions as if the future hasn't happened. You still mourn the past as if it's truly gone. You live on the edge of something that doesn't exist. So what is now really? Is it a spotlight scanning across the block universe, lighting up each moment one at a time? Is it a quantum selection, collapsing probability into momentary fact? Is it a fiction of consciousness, a necessary illusion to give the story of your life its narrative spine? Or is it something we haven't yet understood, a structure not in physics but in awareness itself? Some theorists propose that time doesn't flow at all, that change is an illusion, that we are frozen inside the 4D sculpture of space-time, and our sense of now is the light of a projector passing over each frame. But that implies the future is already real, the past still exists, and you, the one reading this, are just one slice of a timeless whole. And yet, you still feel now. You feel it right now, don't you? The pressure of the moment, the breath in your lungs, the flicker of attention. This isn't abstract. It's not theoretical. It's happening. And you want to know why this moment feels real when all others don't. But no one can tell you. Because the problem of now is unsolvable, not because it's too hard, but because it exists at the intersection of physics and phenomenology. It's a question about the first-person experience of time, and physics has no place for the first person. So we pretend. A space-time where all moments are equal, where no one blinks, where nothing happens. And now? Now is the name we give to the part of eternity we happen to be looking at. Time, you're told, moves forward. It's a line, a path, a progression. But what if that line curved? What if it looped around on itself like a snake eating its tail? What if you could walk through space-time, step by step, until you arrived, not at your future, but at your past? This isn't set science fiction. It's SEP's math, and it sits horrifying. Let's slow down. In the curved geometry of general relativity, space-time is not fixed or flat. It bends around mass, around energy, around movement, and under certain extreme conditions like in the presence of rotating black holes, cosmic strings, or exotic matter, space-time can bend so intensely that a path through space also becomes a path through time. A closed Timelike curve is not a metaphor. It's a literal path that a particle, or a person, could follow to loop back into their own past. But the moment you entertain that possibility, reality begins to fracture. Because here's the paradox. If you can return to your past, you can interact with it. And if you can interact with it, you can change it. But if you change it, you might erase the conditions that led you to travel back in the first place. Welcome to the bootstrap paradox. A version of you invents time travel after reading a manual that someone gave you, and then travels back in time to give yourself that same manual. But who wrote it? No one. The information has no origin. It exists in an eternal loop, a ghost story made of logic. Or worse, you go back to prevent your own existence. But without your existence, there's no one to go back, and yet, you already did. Every step through a closed time-like curve threatens to delete the floor behind you. So physicists try to stop it. They whisper about chronology protection, conjectures, laws of the universe that forbid such loops. They look for reasons. CTCs can't exist in the real world, but the math doesn't break. The equations hold. The universe doesn't say no. Now feel this. If CTCs are possible, even just once, then cause and effect are not fundamental. The arrow of time is a local artifact, not a universal rule. Somewhere, in some pocket of space-time, reality loops, and in that loop, the difference between cause and consequence collapses. You could be the result of your own actions. Your choices today could be shaped by outcomes in your future. In fact, you might already be inside a CTC. Your memories might just be the current iteration of a loop you've been living for eons, a recursion so smooth you forgot it was happening. Your sense of progress might be a spiral, not a line, and that itch in your thoughts. That déjà vu, that flicker of wait, haven't I already been here? That might not be metaphorical. It might be the loop remembering itself. So now the question isn't it. Can closed time-like curves exist? The question is, what happens to you when they do? Do you remain coherent? Do you split? Do you become the author of your own origins? Or do you dissolve into the recursive logic of a world where beginnings and endings are illusions? And you realize, you stir not trying to escape the past. You're trying to figure out if you've ever escaped it. Or if this has all happened before, and will happen again, and has never stopped happening. Close your eyes. Try to remember what you were doing yesterday. A conversation, a smell, a moment that felt real. You feel the image pull itself forward. You see it, you believe it, but something strange happens. The more you focus on the memory, the more it changes. You aren't just recalling it. You start rewriting it. This is the foundation of the memory paradox. The disturbing realization that you never truly remember the past. You only remember the last time you remembered it. And each time you remember, you edit the file, you overwrite, you distort. Your memories aren't time machines. They are reconstructions, built from fragments, bits of smell, mood, language, color, expectation. Your brain stores pieces, not reals, and each act of remembering is an act of creation, not retrieval, a simulation, not a recording. And worse, you believe the new version more than the original. You are building it again, inside the neural architecture of now. You are not returning to a moment, and yet you trust it, this ghostly process. You base your identity on it. Your regrets, your loyalties, your grief, all of them hinge on a system that lies to you with perfect sincerity. That sips the paradox. But it sips always present. Memory feels like the past. It's the past pretending to be itself, inside a machine that only knows now. Let sits go deeper. Neurologically, memory is a distributed process. It is not stored in a vault. It's scattered across the brain. Amygdala for emotion, hippocampus for structure, cortex for sensory detail. Recalling a memory reactivates the entire network, and in doing so, rewires it. The act of remembering changes the memory. Every time. You believe that who you are now came from who you were then. But what if the story you're telling is based on versions that never existed? What if your memory has no ground truth? So if your memory is built to serve the future, not reflect the past? What if you are the fiction your brain keeps rewriting? Some cognitive scientists go further. They argue that memory is not a storage system at all, but a predictive tool. You remember not to preserve the past, but to anticipate the future. The brain reshapes your recollection based on what's useful now. You don't store events, you store meanings, emotional interpretations, selective truths. You trust your past to anchor your decisions. You tell stories about who you were. You think, I'm like this because that happened. But if the that is a reconstruction, then the this is built on sand. What exactly are you made of? You are not the child you remember. You are a recursive simulation of your own myth. You are the sum of what remembering them feels like today. You are not the teenager you imagine. You may have fabricated your traumas. You may be fighting battles that never occurred, carrying guilt for things no longer true. You might mourn someone who never existed in quite the way you recall. And you still never know. Because every time you ask your brain for the past, it smiles and says, sure, here sits what we need it to be. So the paradox deepens. If you can only remember the past by altering it, then have you ever truly remembered anything at all? Or have you only ever built convincing fictions, stories that feel like memories but are really echoes of a present need? You remember your life like it was a film, but you sever the screenwriter, even now, and you're still editing the script. You think you are one person, living one life, across one continuous stream of time. You feel it as a thread, thin but unbroken, pulling your attention from moment to moment, from waking to sleeping, from birth to now. But what if that thread isn't real? What if you are not a single self moving through time, but a collection of observer moments, isolated slices of awareness, stitched together by memory and habit, into a story that never existed as one whole? This is the chilling heart of observer moment drift, a theory rooted in philosophy, cosmology, and quantum probability. It asks a single, destabilizing question. What if your experience of continuity is an illusion, and the you reading this sentence is not the same you who read the one before? In this theory, the unit of reality is not a person, not a life, not a universe, but a single observer moment, a flash of awareness, a brief mental configuration, with no guarantee of what came before or after, like a single page ripped from a book you've never seen. The page contains a story, but you have no proof the rest of the book exists. You think you've been reading a coherent narrative, but maybe you're just holding one page and imagining the rest. Your sense of continuity comes from memory, but as we've seen, memory is reconstruction. You don't remember the past, you hallucinate it, based on data in the present. The you who remembers your childhood, your pain, your favorite meal, only exists in this moment. As this configuration, there is no persistent observer moving between them. There are only observer moments, and they drift. Here sits where it gets deeper. If we imagine an infinite multiverse, where every possible brain state, every possible thought, every possible configuration of experience already exists, then your current observer moment is just one among countless others that feel exactly like you. They all believe they're the real one. They all remember similar pasts, but they aren't connected. They just share a pattern. So the question is not, who are you? The question is, which one are you now? And how long will you stay here? Observer moment drift suggests that there's no true continuity. There's only a probabilistic chain of moments that appear connected, but are actually selected, one after the other by something deeper, something unknowable. You don't just move through time. You are reselected into existence moment by moment. And the moments you get to experience are not guaranteed. That sips the horror of drift. It's not about forgetting who you were. It's about becoming someone who never was, with perfect certainty. Some theorists link this idea to anthropic reasoning. In a universe where every possible version of you exists, you are most likely to find yourself inside a moment that's stable, familiar, plausible. But there's nothing that guarantees the next observer moment will be a continuation. You could jump, drift, fade. You are a candle flame, not a rope, and the wax remembers nothing. Now look around. The world feels continuous. Your body feels coherent. Your thoughts feel like your own. But they're not yours. Not really, they are this moment's. This configuration's. You are not remembering. You are being rendered with a memory buffer, a simulation of continuity. And when this moment ends, there is no after, not from here. The next moment may belong to a different you who thinks they've always been real, because that's how the moment was designed. So ask yourself, and if it is, are you okay with it being the last, You are surrounded by a world that seems whole. A sky stretching endlessly above you. Histories running deep into the past. Futures branching infinitely ahead. But what if this vastness is a lie? What if everything you can observe, remember, or imagine is just a tiny patch of an incomprehensibly larger universe, and the rest might as well not exist? Welcome to the unsettling realm of causal patch incompleteness, a theory born from cosmology, quantum gravity, and black hole physics. It proposes that what you call reality is not the universe, but your accessible portion of it. And beyond that, there is no meaningful reality. Not to you. Not ever. Let's start with a black hole. When something crosses the event horizon, it's lost to the outside forever. The information beyond the horizon is inaccessible, not just practically, but fundamentally. No signal can escape. No observation can reach. From the perspective of an outside observer, it might as well be erased. This leads to the idea of a causal patch, the region of space-time that can causally affect or be affected by a particular observer. In simple terms, it's your bubble of knowable existence. Everything outside it, completely irrelevant, not because it doesn't exist, but because it can never matter to you. In certain cosmological models, like eternal inflation or de Sitter space, the universe is so vast and expanding so quickly that every observer becomes effectively sealed into their own causal patch, like islands adrift in a sea that stretches faster than light. You'll never see outside it, never interact with it, never verify it. So now the paradox appears. If the universe is infinite, but your causal patch is finite, and if no information from outside can ever enter, then your universe is complete from your perspective. There's no outside to escape to, no elsewhere to verify, and therefore the rest might as well not exist. Reality becomes observer relative. But you might only ever inhabit a self-contained illusion, stitched together from what can be causally known. Now go deeper. What if even your memories are just internal phenomena inside your causal patch? What if your sense of history, of causes and effects stretching into the deep past, is not evidence of a shared reality, but a locally generated story, crafted from light cones and information boundaries? If that's true, then your belief in a shared world is based entirely on inference. You trust that other people, other places, other times exist, not because you can reach them, but because you've never had a reason not to. But what if that trust is misplaced? What if you exist in a causal loop, a sealed chamber of light and thought, endlessly feeding you only what you can observe? This leads to an even darker implication. You might be the only observer in your patch. The rest, every face you see, every conversation you have, every news article, every memory, might be internal echoes, self-contained simulations designed to preserve the illusion of continuity. And if so, you are not a person in a world. Causal patch incompleteness doesn't just question your access to reality. It questions whether reality is even a useful word anymore. If nothing outside your causal patch can influence you, if no verification is ever possible, if all you know is what light and time have let through, then your universe is not what sits real. It sets what sets reachable. And when your life ends, when your observer status collapses, your patch collapses too. Not metaphorically, literally. The observable universe for you shrinks to a point. No more causality, no more time, no more reality. Is the universe still there if you can't observe it? Or has it already ended? And you just haven't noticed yet? You believe time is smooth. A ribbon, a river, a reel, unspooling from the past into the future. Seamless, fluid. But what if it's none of those things? What if time is not continuous at all, but granular, quantized like matter and energy? Not a flow, but a chain of indivisible loops. Welcome to loop quantum time, a theory born from the strange tangled mathematics of loop quantum gravity, where the very fabric of space-time is not made of lines, but of loops, where time is not a backdrop, but a structure, one that might not even be real in the way you think it is. Let's dismantle it. Loop quantum gravity is one of the leading attempts to unify quantum mechanics with general relativity. In this framework, space is not infinitely divisible. It's woven from tiny loops of quantum fields, forming a kind of granular geometry, a spin network, a web of tiny knots, each a pixel of space itself. And time? In this theory, time is instead fundamental. It's not part of the base layer of reality. It's not stitched into the equations. Instead, time emerges only when the loops of space interact, only when there is change. In a profound way, without movement, there is no time. Not because time paused, but because time never existed until movement defined it. Time is relational, not absolute. It's not the thing ticking in the background. It's the change in the configuration of the loops. A process, a derivative, a story the loops tell themselves as they recombine. Which means, if nothing changes, time disappears. And that brings us to the paradox. If time only exists when space loops interact, then what happens in the absence of interaction? In the stillness between ticks, is there a between at all? Or is the illusion of flow just your brain translating loop states into a hallucination of continuity? You steer not flowing through time. You're being rewritten by the rearrangement of loops. Each version of you, each breath, each thought, is a configuration of quantum loops. There is no master clock counting seconds. There is only a shift in pattern, and your awareness. It rides the edge of these rearrangements, like a spotlight scanning a flickering mosaic. You don't remember the past. You remember the last loop configuration that resembled this one. And the future? It isn't set to place you shall visit. It sits a pattern that hasn't emerged yet. Or maybe it already has, but you're not looped into it yet. Now here sits where it fractures deeper. If space-time is made of loops, and time is emergent, then there might be no fixed order of moments at the fundamental level, no arrow, no before and after, only correlations, one state being adjacent to another, but adjacency isn't sequence, it's structure without story. Your brain adds the story. It imposes a timeline. But reality may not agree. This is the existential violence of loop quantum time. It strips away your narrative. It tells you that what you call time is just a macroscopic artifact, like temperature, or color, or sorrow, a feature of perception, not of the universe. So when you ask what time is it, the universe answers. What loops are you made of? And when you die? Perhaps the loops disentangle. Perhaps they reconfigure into something else. Perhaps there is no after, because after was only ever the name you gave to loop rearrangement from within the illusion of continuity. There is no clock. There is only the pattern. And now, you feel it, don't you? That slight dislocation. That suspicion that this moment is not flowing, but flickering. That between each heartbeat is not time, but absence. That you are not a person moving through the hours, but a knot in the quantum loom, occasionally lit up with the illusion of motion. So ask yourself, if time is not real, why are you still aging? Or, are you? You believe the past is behind you. Safe. Solid. Gone. But real. A trail of moments frozen in amber, etched into the history of the world, and into the folds of your memory. You trust the past because it feels like the only thing that can't change. Not as a philosophical experiment. But literally the past is not real. It is not there. It is not anywhere. This is the haunting proposition behind the theory of the non-existence of the past, a perspective held by presentists, some philosophers of time, and increasingly echoed in certain interpretations of physics and consciousness. Let's sit with this. You are experiencing this moment. Right now. Your senses are alive. Your awareness is engaged. This moment, this now, is real. But where is yesterday? Not your memory of it. Not the story you tell. Where is it, physically? There's no place you can go to touch yesterday. No direction you can point in to find it. It is not above or below, not behind or ahead. There is no storage bin in the universe labeled the past. Once a moment passes, it is gone. Not somewhere else. Just not. That sips the paradox. Because your entire sense of identity is built on the past. You remember who you were. You define yourself by your history. You blame, you regret, you cherish, you grieve. But if the past doesn't exist, then your life story is not a trail. It's a storyboard pinned to a moment that no longer is. You are a being made of references to non-existent events. Think about memory. When you remember something, you're not traveling to the past. You're generating a neurological pattern in the present. That pattern feels like the past, but it isn't. It's a reconstruction, a present state that simulates a former one. Your brain uses these simulations to maintain the illusion of a continuous identity. But that identity is only now. It always has been. The past in this view is not gone. It was never there. It was never a thing. It was just the previous configuration of matter and energy that now no longer exists. Not anywhere. Not waiting to be revisited. Not frozen in the archive of the cosmos. It was real for a moment, then erased. Some physicists try to save the past. Eternalists argue that all moments exist eternally in a four-dimensional block. But this perspective, this presentist view, says no. The only real thing is what exists now. And when now changes, reality itself is overwritten. Like a chalkboard that erases itself with every new word. So what does this mean for you? It means your childhood is not behind you. It's not. It isn't. You're not older than you were yesterday, because yesterday no longer is. Your body has changed. Yes. But even that is a now state, a current configuration. You are the present snapshot of a pattern that once had different forms, none of which exist anymore. You are constantly reappearing. And every time you do, you believe you've been here all along. Here sips the horror. You might not be the same person who fell asleep last night. You might just be a configuration of brain and body that feels like it remembers falling asleep. But that you is gone. Not somewhere else. Just not. The non-existence of the past forces you to abandon comfort. It strips away the illusion of permanence. It removes the stage beneath your narrative. It leaves only this moment, blinking, fragile, and solitary. And when this moment ends, so does everything. So you take a breath. You feel the shape of this instant. You try to memorize it, but you can't. Because by the time you do, it's already gone. And the version of you that remembers it? Hasn't it been born yet? You are the only one who exists. That's the classical solipsist's curse. A philosophy that says, I can only be sure of my own mind. Everything else, people, places, the world, is possibly an illusion. But now imagine a deeper, darker variation, one that doesn't question others, but questions when. Temporal solipsism is the belief, or the fear, that the only moment that truly exists is this one, right now, this precise, flickering instant of experience, and that every other moment, past or future, memory or anticipation, is an illusion created by this observer moment alone. There are no other times. Only this. Let it settle. You are here. You are reading this. You feel time stretch behind you like a long hallway of footsteps, and ahead, a future filled with choices and consequences. But what if that hallway never existed? What if those choices are never made? What if there is no hallway, just a spotlight hovering over a single tile? In temporal solipsism, you are not a person traveling through time. Now here sips the twist. You think you remember, you think you planned, but what you call memory and intention are part of this moment's design. This current configuration contains everything, your thoughts, your beliefs, your history, but that history only feels real. It isn't something you moved through, it's part of the present illusion. You were never born. You never grew up. You didn't stat walk here. You just appeared in this moment, with a complete backstory wired into your brain, like a character waking up mid-scene, assuming the rest of the movie has already played. And the worst part? This might be the only time you'll ever exist. The past doesn't exist. The future hasn't happened, and no moment guarantees the next. So what's keeping this moment from being the only observer moment that ever occurs? Nothing. And if that's true, then you are a conscious spark in a frozen void, believing in continuity, because your internal programming simulates a timeline. Now breathe. But temporal solipsism replies, you only feel those now, and that's all there ever is. There is no connection between moments. There are no moments at all. Only this one. Some physicists nod toward this idea, suggesting that observer moments might be self-contained phenomena that exist in isolation, selected probabilistically from all possible conscious states. In this view, the flow of time is not required, only the moment itself, and the awareness embedded within it. You are that awareness. And you are alone. Utterly. You might think you were somewhere else a second ago, but that's just this moment's internal assumption, like a dream that begins in the middle. You didn't get here, you were generated here, fully formed, believing a lie. Even if the universe is vast, and moments continue elsewhere, they are not yours. They are not linked to this one. You are not part of a stream. You are a puddle that thinks it's a river. A single dot of sentience in the void, imagining it has a history. And maybe in the next possible moment, a version of you will exist again with slightly altered thoughts, a different sensation of memory, but it won't be you, it will just feel like you. So the question is, if this is the only moment that ever exists, if this is the only you that ever lives, what will you do with it? Will you panic? Or will you pause? And listen to the silence between now and never. You remember your past. You carry it like a backpack of memories, worn and soft-edged, stitched with moments both beautiful and broken. But the future? That's different. The future is always ahead, foggy, unfinished, waiting to be written. What if it's already out there, entirely real, entirely structured, and the only reason you don't remember it is because your brain is not designed to? This is the unsettling premise behind the forgotten future. The idea that the only reason the future seems unreal is because you've forgotten it. Not in a poetic sense. In a literal one. Let's start with what physics tells us. In theories like Eternalism, or the block universe, the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. Time is a dimension, like space. You don't create the future, you move through it. Every moment is equally real, your birth, your death, and everything in between. So if the future exists just as concretely as the past, after all, you remember the past. You define yourself by it. You organize your life around it. But that's just because your neurology is wired to store earlier events. Your biology evolved in a world where entropy increases, where causes precede effects, so your brain stores memories in one direction. But there's nothing in physics that says the brain couldn't remember the future too. There sits only the habit of nature, and that habit might be blinding you. In this view, the future is as fixed as the past, and your mind only sees half the map. You live in a hall of mirrors, walking backward into a world you pretend to be discovering, and the other half of the mirrors, the forward-facing ones, have been blacked out. You are blindfolded by biology. But the future is still there. Now imagine this. What if the strange feelings you get, déjà vu, intuition, dread, aren't mystical or random? What if they're glitches in your forgetting mechanism? Brief leaks from a memory bank you're not supposed to have, a bleed through from moments ahead that already exist, and which you've already lived, but have been programmed not to recall. You are not creating the future. You are reliving it with half your vision disabled. This brings us to the paradox. If the future already exists, and if you are moving toward moments that are already fixed, then freedom dissolves. You aren't choosing your path. You're experiencing a script with amnesia for Act 2. You are a character walking through a play you helped write, but no longer remember. But it goes deeper. If forgetting the future is a condition of existing in time, then perhaps your sense of identity is based entirely on that ignorance. To be a self is to remember the past and forget the future, to be a loop that only runs one way. And here sits where it turns recursive. If you could remember the future, you would lose the present. Because the illusion of choice would break. You would see the consequences of your actions before the actions themselves. You would watch your grief arrive before your mistake. You would see your death walking toward you, step by step, inevitable and indifferent. So maybe the forgetting is mercy. Maybe you forget the future not because it's impossible to remember, but because you couldn't survive knowing it. But maybe it's the price of coherence. What if all your plans are actually memories? What if the dreams you dismiss as fantasies are previews? What if the reason the future feels so unpredictable is because you've already forgotten how it ends? So you continue on, blind to what sits next, faithful to the fiction that tomorrow is empty. But deep down, something aches. A shadow of a thought, curled like smoke behind your eyes. Used to have been here before. You just don't sit, remember. You die. And then you open your eyes. You are back in your childhood room. The sunlight looks familiar. The smell in the air, the heaviness in your limbs, the silence of a new morning. You have no memory of what came before. Just a sense of déjà vu so deep it feels like gravity. You've lived this life before. This is the haunting cycle of the eternal return, an ancient thought experiment with terrifying implications. It suggests that everything you are experiencing you have experienced before, and you will again, over and over, infinitely, every moment, every breath, every mistake. Not once, but forever. The idea comes from Nietzsche, who asked if a demon whispered in your ear that you must live this exact life again, every detail unchanged. Would you rejoice or collapse in despair? But eternal return is more than philosophy. It simps physics too. In a finite universe with finite states and infinite time, every possible configuration of particles must eventually repeat. The laws of probability demand it. If the universe is a giant cosmic dice game, and there are only so many ways to roll, then sooner or later, the same hand will appear again. And not just once. Endlessly. You are not unique. You are one of infinite copies, scattered across the vastness of eternal time. Some just like you. Some exactly you. In every loop, you live the same life, say the same words, feel the same doubts, think the same thoughts, including this one. Yes, this one. You've thought it before, and you will again. This moment, this sentence has happened, is happening, will happen, all at once, like a groove on a record, spinning back to the same note again and again. You try to resist the idea. You say, but I make choices, I learn, I grow, I change. But in eternal return, your choices are not new, they are the same choices you've always made. They feel spontaneous, but they're written into the loop. You are not choosing. You are repeating. And the worst part? You don't remember. Each cycle begins with forgetfulness. You re-enter the world like a blank page, trusting the illusion of progress. But nothing is progressing. Nothing is becoming. You are trapped in a cosmic GIF, an infinite rerun of your own life, where freedom is just another line in the script. Now let's deepen the paradox. What if your sense of regret, that aching pull towards something different, is actually memory, a ghost from your previous loop? What if your desire to make better choices is just an echo of what you failed to do last time, and the time before that, and the time before that? What if guilt is a symptom of loop awareness? What if déjà vu is a glitch from a past iteration bleeding into this one? What if dreams are leaks from other cycles? And now imagine this. What if every time you die, you are instantly reborn as yourself again, with no escape, no change, no reset, just a perfect recursive prison of identity? This isn't just a metaphysical trap. It stips an ontological horror. Because if eternal return is true, then salvation doesn't exist. Nor does progress. Nor does ending. You are the Ouroboros, the snake devouring its own tail, not in punishment, but in design. You are your own ancestor, your own reincarnation, your own haunting. And yet, what if this is the deepest form of meaning? What if your only task is to live each repetition as if you had chosen it, to love the loop, to embrace the spiral, to say yes, not to change, but to eternity? Nietzsche called this amor fati, the love of fate. Because, if everything returns forever, then the only true freedom is to say yes, I would do it again, and again, and again, and again. Tick. Tick. You hear the sound of time passing, marked by the hands of a clock that never hesitates. But now imagine a clock that knows it's measuring time, and in doing so, begins to doubt its own ticking. It starts to question the truth of each second, and as it doubts, it begins to slow, falter, stutter. Not because it ran out of time. This is the final paradox. The clock that breaks itself, the self-defeating mechanism of conscious beings trying to measure, understand, and master time, only to unravel it by doing so. Let's wind it back. Your brain is a biological clock, a timekeeper made of neurons and decay. It tracks durations, predicts sequences, organizes causality. It keeps you sane. Without this clock, you wouldn't remember your name. You wouldn't know what came first, your breath or your thought. Because your awareness of time isn't passive. But the moment you begin to examine that clock, truly examine it, it begins to slip. How can a clock measure itself? It's performative. You feel time passing not because it is, but because your system creates the sensation of passage. But when that system reflects on itself, when it tries to become aware of the mechanism, it introduces a paradox. Try it now. Focus on the moment. Try to experience now directly, without remembering the past or anticipating the next second. Try to isolate the precise moment in which you exist. You'll find that the tighter you squeeze, the more it dissolves. You cannot catch now. You can only observe the trail it leaves. And in this self-reference lies the collapse. Just as a video camera pointed at its own feed creates an infinite loop of distortion, so too does the conscious mind observing time create recursive noise. You can track the world, Or you can track yourself tracking the world, but not both, not cleanly, not without feedback tearing the signal apart. In physics, this is reflected in certain interpretations of quantum measurement. The observer collapses the wave function by observing, but can never observe themselves without disturbing the system. Self-measurement introduces a kind of impossibility. You cannot fully perceive the framework that enables perception. And yet, you try. We all try. We create atomic clocks, time crystals, GPS systems accurate to billionths of a second. But what are we chasing? Precision? Control? Or the deeper need to make the illusion feel more real? Because the truth is, the more we refine time, the more we discover it isn't there. It dissolves into granularity, into relativity, into loops and probability, and emergent properties. It's not a dimension. It's not a thing. And now the clock knows. And the clock is breaking. You are the clock. You are the hands. You are the gearwork turning against itself, grinding down the narrative you once trusted. You are the tick that questions the tock. Because if time is a construction, and the constructor loses faith, you look around, everything seems stable, but deep beneath the surface, the metronome is stalling. The seconds are losing definition. You are running out of belief. Tock. Tick. Tick. You have reached the end of the thought experiment. But if time isn't set real, did you ever begin? You never started. You are here again. Not at the end, not at the beginning. Just here. You wandered through loops and theories, touched paradoxes like bruises, stared into clocks that couldn't tell time, and now you step trying to leave, but something in you already knows. This entire journey was a spiral, and you were walking it backward, or forward, or both. You traced timelines that don't exist, remembered futures that never happened, and forgot pasts that never were. You thought you were listening to a script, but the voice was yours. It always was. You are not outside this experiment. You are the experiment. Now, you realize the truth. And now, time didn't break. You did. You are the clock. You are the ticking. You are the hallucination of motion inside a still frame. You are the illusion of continuity, desperately reassembled each second by a nervous system trying to survive uncertainty. You thought this would give you answers, but answers imply resolution, and resolution implies a stopping point. Time never stops. And time? Not because it moves, but because it was never there to begin with. All your beliefs, your fears, your memories, they orbit a void, a center made of nothing, a perfect circle that contains every version of you, flickering like static, pretending to be a line. The thought experiment didn't reveal the truth. So here you are again. It was the truth. You are a thought trying to think itself. You are a future trying to remember its origin. There is no end. You already been here. And you still be here again. And again. And again. Until the clock stops asking,